We're here to empower high-income earners to gain back control of your time through financial independence and stop trading your time for money and start letting your money work harder for you.
And hey, if you want to meet other high-income earners on their FIRE journey, join our High Income Earners FIRE Facebook group. Every month, we'll have guest speakers and we'll share about what our team is currently working on and allow you to share what you are working on with other high-income earners.
So welcome back to High Income Earners FIRE podcast. My name is Cody Ye. I'm with my co-host, Aline Prague. Today, we have Rob Brake on our show. Rob is an entrepreneur in the world of residential investment real estate with an impressive history of many successful BRRRR projects. Rob has coached and advised countless investors through acquisition and renovations to help build their own generational wealth. Rob and his family has recently relocated to Costa Rica and is flipping houses there, as well as maintaining his real estate team in Ontario at the Breakthrough Property Group under KW Energy. Rob has also joined Crane Luxury Real Estate to help other Canadians fulfill their dream of owning property in Costa Rica. So without further ado, welcome, Rob.
Thank you for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So to kick things off, do you want to give us a quick intro of yourself? I know the bio probably doesn't do justice.
We started our real estate journey in 2007. We bought a duplex in Oshawa. We lived in the top unit and we rented out the basement unit. And we just realized, man, like there's actually money at the end of the month, where that was something that we never knew of before. Neither my wife and I come from money in any way, really. So that was such a new concept to actually have a little bit of money left at the end of the month that we decided to figure out how we could do it again and keep going. Right. So from there, we bought something else relatively quickly. We bought a student rental in Oshawa, and that cash flowed really, really well for us. And that was like just after we had our first boy. Kind of said, yeah, this is the way to go in order to get us both out of our jobs. And funny story, shortly after we bought that second place, the student rental, my wife quit her job. So it was funny at the time. We didn't have to replace much income, but she said, if we can buy something that will replace our income versus having to also pay for childcare, then she'll quit her job. So we found it in that rental, and she's never had to work at a traditional job ever since then. And then, you know, just a bunch of real estate agent stuff, real estate investor stuff. And, you know, I'm sure we can get into that more. That's a quick intro.
So I wanted to ask really quick, because of the childcare situation, did you guys go into real estate with the intention of having your wife quit when you guys had reached a certain point, or was that just an evolution as you guys started to grow and do more and more deals?
What tends to happen is my wife will say, I am starting to manifest this idea that I don't go back to work. And she'll say something like, I feel like it's going to happen in about the next year. And then what tends to happen is a couple of months later, it becomes reality. We find a way to do it, or whatever it is. Like, I envision a door here, Rob. I see it happening soon. And miraculously, my wife is very good at manifesting things, including our, like, all of the real estate we've bought and all the deals that we've done, and moving here, you know, a permanent move to Costa Rica, which is a huge deal, you know, uprooting everything and relocating here. We'd had the idea to move somewhere sunny, at least split our time. But this, like, the idea was accelerated a lot by COVID and what was going on in Canada. I think it was definitely accelerated more by that, because it was initially like a 5 to 10 year plan. So to answer your question, it's a lot of, this is what we're going to do. Now let's follow all the steps to get there.
Yeah, it's interesting once you actually voice it out and you really believe that this is a path that you want to take, and then how you start making those moves to work and towards that goal that you want to see, that vision, that life that you have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think the funny thing is that, you know, it might not be, it's interesting because I think that people sort of think of the goals the wrong way. It's like, I want this thing for my life, not necessarily a monetary goal or a number of properties or anything like that. Just, I want to be able to do this. And those other things sort of fall into place. So it may be that you need 5 duplexes in order to do whatever X was, right? To have the money to do it. But your goal isn't to have 5 duplexes, and your goal isn't to have that exact amount of cash flow that those 5 duplexes generate. Your goal is something in your life. I find that's a lot more powerful, right? And then those other things are the means to that end.
I think that's really, really powerful. And I think a lot our listeners, or even someone very close to me, when they go through the traditional education, they never had the courage to manifest, or they don't know how to manifest because they don't even dare to imagine that. But people like yourself, Eileen, yourself, when we took the courage to do it and we continuously manifest and hit it, manifest the next thing and hit it, we got into the momentum cycle. But people who never done it, how would you suggest to those people get into this kind of cycle, the positive cycle that we're in? How would you push those people or encourage them to get into this cycle?
That's a bit of a tricky question for me because I'm more nuts and bolts, and my wife is more the one, to be honest, that has those big ideas, right? So maybe it is finding a partner that can pull that stuff out of you, or you can pull it out of them. But, I've found that like all of our partnerships have been very powerful in allowing, whatever we've been able to accomplish, whether it's, partners in clients that I've worked with, or partners in just whatever coach you might have, or partners in your friends, whoever that is. So maybe that's a big part of it.
Surrounding yourself with kind of someone who can compensate you and kind of push you in different ways, right?
Yeah, I'd love to say that I am in tune spiritually like that with the manifestation side of things. And I think I've got a little bit of it, just a tiny grasp of an understanding on what that is. But I think that the ideas, for the most part, come from my wife.
But you're the operator. So your wife is the visionary, the dreamer kind of thing. And you're the operator, the executioner that put everything together and make it happen kind of thing.
The executioner.
Executioner. Sorry, that's probably the wrong word. Operator. That's probably a better word.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you kind of mentioned maybe off the record that, you're permanently moving down to Costa Rica. You sold some of your real estate holdings in Canada. So I know you're heavily in real estate. So is real estate the only asset you're investing in at this point, or are you looking at different assets as well?
I am investing in Bitcoin and crypto now, but I just got started. So I wouldn't be able to speak very well on that, but real estate has done quite well for us so far. And we didn't sell too much off come here. The only, I sold my principal residence and I sold one other property since, and that was just like a month ago.
So maybe we don't have to get into the details of it, but I'd love to understand, if you hadn't invested it in Bitcoin and stocks prior to it, like what made you want to get into it now? Like what intrigued you about it?
Constant nagging from everybody around me, to be perfectly honest. I talk to my business partners in real estate and they go, Rob, you really, really need to get into this. I'm about 500 meters from the Costa Rica Sailing Center. We hang out there a lot. I just got certified. So I can take, yeah, thank you. I was just sailing right before we got on the podcast this morning. And, just the people down there, Rob, you got to get into crypto. So when so many people are saying it, you've just got to go, okay, there's something here. And I'm not heavily invested yet, but we're on our way anyway.
Dipping your toe in.
Dipping our toe in, yeah. And my son is all over it every day. It's like, Dad, let's look at the portfolio.
How old is your son?
11.
Yeah. But
he can be an expert.
Yeah. But what's interesting though, we're looking at what's the next generation looking at really, right? That's what's going to push economy, right? Because they're going to become people start to earn money and become in the labor market, and they'll be the consumers as well. So it's kind of very important to know what's next, right? So I'm very happy that you're very open-minded.
Well, I think it's super important if I can get like just a little bit political here too. When the Canadian government shows us that they are willing to freeze people's bank accounts on their own whims, I think it's important to really start looking at ways to protect yourself, because it might be that you arbitrarily or randomly do something in the future that perhaps they don't agree with. And maybe you need to protect yourself from that happening to you as well.
Can you talk a little bit about that a little bit? Because I'm from the US. And so I'd like to hear a
Aline,
little
you open a can of worms here.
Just a little bit, because when you mentioned freeze the accounts, we don't have to get too much into details on that, but we don't really experience that here in the US. And so just coming from a foreign perspective, I just like to understand it just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so what happened was, I'm sure you heard of the Freedom Convoy that set up in Ottawa, right? Did you hear of that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, it's quite a big news story. In Canada, there was a big group against the mandatory vaccines. Okay. Not against the vaccine necessarily, but just against the mandates, right? That were being introduced, especially in certain sectors where a lot of people felt it wasn't necessary. So regardless of what whether you feel one way or the other, a lot of people felt like it was an important demonstration. So there was a group of people, it started out with truckers, and they all congregated in Ottawa, and they were using GoFundMe, and the Canadian government essentially said, we need you guys to defund these guys. So they did, and they went to a different platform. And after a certain amount of time, the Canadian government invoked the Emergencies Act on these protesters. And long story short, anyone who was involved with donating money or going to the demonstrations, regardless of whether you knew that you were doing something wrong at the beginning of all of it, they decided that they would freeze some of the bank accounts. A lot of the trucking companies, there's over 30 trucking companies in Ontario where their accounts have been frozen, and just small businesses who served these demonstrators in their restaurants have been shut down and bank accounts frozen, and anyone who donated. So they did not necessarily know that they were doing anything wrong at first. They thought, hey, this might be a movement I want to get behind, but the ramifications were a lot more than I think anyone could have anticipated. So, it could be that I don't agree with that movement necessarily, or you don't agree with that movement, but it may be next time something you feel, very strongly one way or the other, and you decide to help with the movement, whatever it is, and then the government decides, oh, we don't like that you did that, and we're going to freeze your account. So that's the nutshell of what happened there.
Thank you for
And
that.
I think it's important, again, like that was another Kickstarter, that's where can I put my money where it can't necessarily be touched under those circumstances.
I think this could be one incident. Really, it's a really big incident in Canada from Canadian side. But really overall, I think more and more, not just Canadians, but people all over the world wants more transparency, wants more freedom, wants more freedom to make their own decision. And as long as it's not breaking the laws, everything is peaceful and all that, we're not hurting anyone, we should have the freedom to do that too, right? So we're seeing that it's a momentum going towards that. And even I'm sure the next generation, I'm sure your son will even want more of that, right? So
agreed. And it is funny how I find that the governments, they say one thing and then do something completely different. Like they say they're behind peaceful protests, but then act completely differently. So I think this is the first time I've ever gotten political on any show. I don't know if it's going to be anything people are interested in, but there you go.
No, I was just going to say really quickly, I think it's just interesting, just to get a different perspective on the different cultures or the different countries and what they're doing out there, because I come from the US, and it's very interesting that this types of things happen in Canada. So I think from that perspective is just being aware of what's going on in other countries and then seeing how, people are pivoting or people are looking for ways to, make sure that they are secure financially because they have to make adjustments because they need to protect themselves as well.
Absolutely.
This really leads me to my next question, talking about financial freedom, or freedom of transferring money, accepting money, donating money, and all that. So how are you using all the funds, whether it's from active real estate transaction or from your investment? How are you using these to reach your financial freedom, whether it's early on or until now? Was there any evolution, or you were doing the same thing and just in bigger scale kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, my story is pretty typical, I think, as a small investor goes. And we've been able to do this because of the appreciation that's happened, like ridiculous appreciation over the last 10 years, is we've really been, have you ever heard of a guy named Jason Hartman out of the States? Investor, he does a podcast.
I don't
Oh.
think
Really,
so.
really smart guy. But anyway, I love his saying. He always says, refi until you die, right? Like that's his motto. So I said, yeah, that actually resonates with me. So we've been able to build a lot of wealth and keep progressing through just, subsequent refinancing. And some of my properties I've refinanced 4 times. I would say I'm in a spot right now where I probably want to maybe cool off with that, just because I can see that maybe we're sort of at the top end of the market, and I certainly don't want to over leverage myself or I find myself in trouble. But I mean, it's worked well so far and it's got us where we are. So that was a big part of it.
And
Just
it's
being able to
refinance,
use,
right?
being able to use our investments to almost create money out of thin air, really, and be able to move forward with another investment.
And did you pay tax on those? For our listeners who doesn't understand, do you have to pay tax on those refinance?
You don't pay tax until you sell the house.
So it's really efficient way to pull out the money that might not be even yours. So, when you start a BRRRR project, right, you buy a house, once you refinance and pull all the money you already put in, really the bank is carrying the house for you. And if just like Rob refinanced another 3 times, he's pulling out money from the bank, really. It's none of his own money anymore since the first refi. So that's the beauty of the real estate. And then you don't pay tax until you sell on all those refinance, really. So
yeah. And a lot of times what I've done too is I think there's only one property that I've put my own money into. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's only one. So right even from the beginning, it was more just worrying about getting my partner's money back out on that refi. Take that very seriously, but it was never my own money invested.
you want to touch on a little bit on kind of like your joint venture partners, kind of, are you still taking on new partners, or how's that been going? How was the main strategy you guys were using?
Yeah, the main strategy has sort of changed a little bit. Like the last couple that I've done were student rentals in Peterborough. And so they offer such a unique opportunity there. I'll talk about that a little bit if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so in that town, they have a college and a university and a couple of other sort of subsidiaries, like Seneca has an aviation school there. So it is a really good town to own a student rental. And on top of that, the regulations for student housing are very interesting. So I started in Durham, where they had all of these restrictions, especially around the university itself, because it was getting saturated with student rentals and the people that bought houses there weren't very happy. So they said, okay, in this 5-kilometer circle, to dumb it down, we're not going to allow people to make duplexes, and we're not going to allow people to have more than 4 rooms rented out in a student rental, which kills your cash flow. Basically, just makes no sense really to invest in that area. So in Peterborough, what they've done is they've essentially made a new category for a student rooming house called a large dwelling unit, and they'll allow up to 10 bedrooms in one single dwelling unit legally, and they will license that. So that's been the new strategy that we've been focusing on in Peterborough.
Does it have to be a certain size to be able to put 10 bedrooms into there? Or like, is there a limitation?
Yeah, absolutely. So it has to allow for it, right? You can't, like the rooms all have to be a certain square footage, including the closets and everything too. So, and I actually have one 10-bedroom student rental there. And that place, it just cash flows ridiculously. Our monthly rent is over $7,500 a month. So yeah, so that has been sort of a really, really good transition. And we also rent the garage in that. So we've got the 10 bedrooms and the garage as a separate rental. It's like an 11-unit apartment building, really, you know, especially in Peterborough, because if you look at some of those old buildings where they've got like 1-bedroom apartments or whatever, they're still renting for like $500 or $600 a month. So, you know, all of these rooms, I think the minimum we're getting is $550, and one of our rooms is getting $950 because it's almost like a small
Sweet,
apartment in
kinda
its
thing.
own.
And then
So
I know this is very unique. I heard about student rentals in Peterborough area. Do you guys have any problem with the refinance of that or getting qualified for that? Because only a few banks will probably touch it, right? Can you touch on that a little bit?
yeah, so we are in the process right now of working with a commercial lender. It's proven a little bit difficult because the leases aren't all lining up like from May till May, which is the idea with a student rental. We always want to go from May till May, have that 1-year lease. But just the way that some of them come, some of them go, sometimes there's not anyone there over a summer or whatever. The commercial lender is being very picky about there being 1-year leases on everything. So we're running into a little bit of trouble there. Next time I talk to you, I'll be able to speak on it a bit more. But what I generally say to a client who's looking for a student rental is, you can look at this different way than you would look at a BRRRR project. So let's just take a typical student rental, which would be like 3-bedroom bungalow with a rec room, a bedroom in the basement. So, you know, what you would have to do to that to make it a duplex, you would have to basically rip out the basement and redo it all. Usually like $100,000 to $120,000, right?
Yep.
And then you get that back in the refi, and that's fine. But with the student rental, we're trying really hard to find something set up, just like I said. You've got a big rec room, 1-bedroom, bathroom in the basement, regular bungalow upstairs with 3 bedrooms. Now you really are trying to just put up a wall, maybe do a little bit of electrical so that the lights on each side of the old rec room, where now you've made 2 bedrooms, work for this room that they're in. Maybe you got to put in a window, but we're trying to keep the costs really low. So in this circumstance, the cash flow is much higher and you don't necessarily need to refinance out. You're still in it for the down payment and whatever you put into it. But on the other side of it, you're cash flowing much higher. So we often say, maybe don't necessarily consider this as an option for refi in the student rental.
Yeah, for people who want to know more, you can reach out to Rob. Rob seems like he's going through the process as of right now. So all his memories are really, really fresh right now. I'm going to jump into the next question. This is one of the key questions I love to ask all our audience, which is, what is your version of financial independence and retire early? What does that mean for you? What does that look like for you?
Well, I don't necessarily think that I want to retire. Because I mean, I don't know what retire means necessarily, but I enjoy working in some capacity. Even retired people, they don't want to just sit around. So they like to be busy with something. So for me, it more means that I can manage my time the way that I want to. I like to work, but it more or less is on my own terms now. So I think that that's a key part of it. I don't think I'll ever stop working. I enjoy it. I enjoy the way that I like to look at things from here is the exact same as I did when we're still working in Ontario, by the way. James Kennedy on my team is still there and we're still finding great cash flow properties, duplex opportunities, everything in Peterborough and Durham. So anyone who's interested in that, reach out to us as well. But I've always been a property first guy. Right. So when I find a great deal, I go, this is a great deal, everybody. Like, look at this. And that 10-bedroom student rental that I was talking about, I did a bunch of property tours and I showed it probably to 20 different investors and nobody was into it. So I'm like, okay, this is mine then. You know, and that's typically the way that I find the ones that I will take. But so we're doing the same thing here. So I've been finding great properties as far as investments, Airbnb opportunities go here.
You want to share some numbers in Costa Rica? Because I know a lot of our audience might be interested if they say they go down. What should they be looking at, kind of thing? What is a very reserved way or very conservative way to invest in Costa Rica that just can't go wrong?
That just can't go wrong. Well, man, I'm not going to say that
he has the magic secret sauce.
Yes. Yes. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of different, like we've got condos everywhere along the beach, the entire coast is covered with condos. So there's always good opportunities there. But where I find the most opportunity for flip properties is in single family homes still. So, and we haven't done any flips. This house right here was supposed to be a flip. We've decided to actually move into this one for now. It'll
Mm.
probably end up being an Airbnb next high season. That's the goal. But just in the fact that most deals are cash deals here, there's not much in the way of financing other than possibly seller financing. And there is a lot of seller financing available, but it's generally no more than 5 years, most typically like 3 years for finance on owner financing with about 50% down. So I'm just gonna really dumb it down. You're probably like, you would want to find something with about a 15% cash return. And I'd say that that's pretty easy to find.
Do you mind sharing like maybe a number for this house? Probably not because you haven't flipped it, but like a typical flip, what's the number you guys are looking at? How much you're going to buy for, how much you're going to put in, and
Well,
how's that going to
again,
work on
the
Airbnb and all that? Have you guys?
the market is going up just like it is there. It's actually been pretty crazy. And something that's happened in this area here recently is that the ASADA, which is the water companies, you need to, on any vacant lot, you have to have the ASADA sign off on a water letter so that you can build on the lot. And what they have done, it was probably about a month ago, is in Surfside here where we live, and in Potrero, which is the next town north, as well as a couple other smaller towns just south of here, they have stopped issuing water letters altogether. And the reason for that is because people were constructing properties that consumed more water than they were supposed to, right? And so all of the ASADAs can't handle now the Airbnb properties with like something like this, where people would build a casita on the back and rent that out as well, build 2 or even 3 units on where there was only supposed to be 1. And now the demand on the water supply is skyrocketed. So they need to build new holding tanks in all of these areas. And that's supposed to be somewhere between a 2 and 5 year project. So they've put everything on hold. So anything with a water letter now has just shot right up in value. So that's one thing to consider. And then, but we'll go with just some basic numbers. You can probably find some single family that could use some fixing for 350
USD, right?
USD. Everything's in USD. I would say as long as it's got the pool already, you can probably get away with 40 to 50,000 for the reno. And then when people ask me, like, because it varies, like the scope of work obviously varies depending on what you're dealing with. But I always say, like, you can do a lot with 50 grand here. So if you were to say, that's my budget, and work backwards on things like in priority sequence, when you're done spending your 50 grand, your place will be ready. So that's how I would recommend that everyone work on things here. And then, so you've got 400 into it, you're probably worth about 5, right around 5, maybe a little bit more.
And then let's say if you said there's no bank financing really. So what's the typical plan for an investor? They just hold on to it, either rent it out long term, or do they rent it out on Airbnb? And what's the occupancy rate look like?
Long-term rentals are tricky here. You don't want to get mixed up in that. They have more rights than they do in Ontario.
Oh, really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For
Like
Eileen, who doesn't know, Ontario is very protective about
very
tenants.
pro-tenant.
Pro-tenants, yeah.
pro-tenant.
Tenants have a lot of rights to the Ontario government. They treat investor as a business, but they treat the tenants as their home. This is the exact word that they use. So you probably seen it, sorry to interrupt you.
So for long-term, it's a minimum 3-year lease. So you got to be very careful.
Wow, 3 years.
Put everything through Airbnb or Vrbo. That is my advice to you. So it's all short-term. I guess I can't blanket statement for what everybody's goals are, but yeah, most people are buying for short-term rental, right? Short-term rental. And then the occupancy rates, it depends. If you're starting with something right from scratch, you're going to have to market it and get people into it. So we generally use like about a 15-week on the first year. But typically it's about 50% occupancy. If you buy in the right place, you're going to get about 50%. When I send a pro forma, I could send you just a pro forma on one of the most recent places that one of my clients bought.
Yeah, you
And
can do
we,
that. And then I could, Aline and I run a monthly update. We talk about stocks, we talk about real estate in Toronto, talk about real estate in LA or around the California area. Then we could probably add in as Costa Rica. Hey, we have a case study here just
right.
for fun, right?
Well, we always start with a lot lower occupancy rate so that people can build their referrals. They can have those repeat visits and also have all of the new customers coming in through, the marketing. But 26 weeks is about average.
Mhm. And then with that, would they be able to cover if they do go for bank financing, which is none? And you said 15% cash on cash, right? So that's all included in with the cash flow, 15% cash on cash kind of thing.
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, fantastic. But I think we are coming up on a little bit of time here. We want to be respectful of your time too, Rob. But we do have a couple of closing questions in the lightning round that we want to get to before close out here. So, Cody, you want to start off with the first one?
So you didn't tell me there was a lightning round.
We like to surprise the guests. Just kidding, no. It keeps things interesting.
And I promise the first question is a very interesting one. So are you ready, Rob?
Sure.
If you become a billionaire with the B tomorrow, what will your day look like?
I'd probably be sailing a lot and I would be scouring for my next building. Here in Costa Rica, we're actually very interested in looking in some property in El Salvador and Nicaragua. So we're interested in expanding to other countries too. So that's probably what I would do.
And if you were to start all over again, let's say you lost everything, but you were handed a $500,000 check, what would you do to start again, to build up whatever life you want to?
It's 2022.
Yes.
Right now.
Yeah.
The reason why I ask that is because most of our listeners will be high income earners and they have a good income, but they probably have like a chunkable saving on the side, but they don't know what to do. So this is questions really help them out. If you have to start today, losing everything but your brain.
I'd go to a market where they allow secondary suites. I would probably be able to buy, let's say 5 of them with $500,000 in that market. And I think that's a perfect way to start out. I'm in a place where I can get financing, obviously, with that scenario.
Yes, because you have high income, right? So go to
all of my answers are going to be real estate, like,
surprise, surprise, audience. Yeah. So if you're going to be a podcast host, and I know you're already one, who would you really want to interview?
My answer is, and I've heard him on other podcasts, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a super bright entrepreneur and he owns a lot of real estate and just had an amazingly exciting life. So that's definitely who it would be.
Oh man, now I'm gonna go check out one of his podcast episodes. I didn't even know he did those. So I got to go check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you have a context to him, like don't hesitate to shoot it to us. We'll make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
And so then the other question is, if later on, when we become financially independent ourselves and we're able to donate to other charities, we like to listen to what other guests have in mind also that they've also donated to, so that we're keeping just like a running list, so that we're more aware of what other charities are out there, different ways to give back to the community. If you were to choose one, which one would you choose to donate for a good cause?
My wife has type 1 diabetes. We've always been focused on that area. The Charles H. Best Society in Whitby, the one that we like. Yeah, I'm sure that there's other ones in wherever area your listeners are listening from that they could get involved in that.
So the last question will be, if our listeners want to hear more about your real estate, hear more about your podcast, hear more about your Costa Rica journey, where can they find you?
You can email me at rob@mrbreakthrough.ca, or we do have our podcast, Breakthrough Real Estate Investing Podcast, .ca, and on Twitter, I think it's just Rob Break, or it might be
Rob Breakthrough. I have it here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah. I don't give it out much, but thank you. Yeah. Rob Breakthrough. There you go.
Okay. So email and then Rob Breakthrough, and then
that's Twitter, right?
Yes, that's Twitter. right?
Yeah.
So that's the three main ways you want people to reach out to you. Cool. Well, Rob, it's been a pleasure. Time's never enough. I know we can talk about for hours. We're going to have you back on the show, but really thank you for your time. And I hope you enjoy your time in Costa Rica and enjoy that virtual background there.
We are. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
I
Rob.
appreciate you having me on, guys. Have a great day.
All the links mentioned in this episode are included in the show notes. And if you love this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple iTunes. The link is also included in the show notes. And we would really appreciate your help in spreading the word to more high income earners on how they too can maximize both their time and money.
Also, if you still haven't joined our High Income Earners Facebook group, you are missing out on High Income Earners community where we help each other reach our own version of FIRE.